Want me to look?
So you can look at Laura, but you can also look in the camera.
Occasionally.
It's kind of like you're talking to an audience, right?
Yeah.
So, you can kind of bounce between.
Let me know you were clearly.
Oops. Fell off.
And 3, 2, 1, whatever.
So Helen, tell me about diversity at IKEA. So what is the composition of IKEA's workforce?
Well, as you know, many of our coworkers are women. Of course, we serve women consumers mostly. But when we look at diversity at IKEA, we have a fairly 50-50 split all around the world, actually. That's our goal also. And if you look at just coworkers, it's a little bit more than 50% that are women. And if you look at managers, it's around 49%.
So why obviously diversity is important, and that's why you've been able to make progress. Tell me why diversity is important for IKEA.
I think as a Swedish company, we're very values-based. So for us, diversity is a human right to start with. So it's not really about men and women, it's a human right. And there's also a composition of 50-50 in the world. So it's pretty obvious that we should try to use everybody to their best. So I would say that our idea about fairness and equality is our starting point when it comes to diversity. And then, of course, if you look at it from a business perspective, I think also when we are mixed groups and we have different opinions, it's not necessarily always easier to come to concrete decisions, and it might take a little longer time at times, but in the end you have much more grounded decisions that make sense from different business perspectives. And also back to the consumer, to meet the demands of the consumer today, you also have to have the ear to the ground, and you have to be able to feel and think like your consumers. And as I said, many of our consumers are women. So it's also very important to be able to understand who they are and their needs.
And what about are there any other kinds of diversity that you're concerned with, or is it primarily?
Yeah, I think for us, it started in 2012 when we said and really decided on a corporate level that, okay, we're going to go for 50-50 on managerial levels because that's the only target that makes sense. And then it's, of course, about that KPI. You need to follow it up and follow through. And when you start to discuss then, okay, is it only about gender diversity? It's of course not only about gender diversity. That's the starting point for us. But inclusion is so much more. There are so many other dimensions of inclusion. So I'll give you an example. I worked in the US. So in the US, it's ethnicity, for example. In Japan, where I work now, it would be about age. So there's also like national perspectives of inclusion that are different. Then there are of course global dimensions to inclusion. So like LGBT, it's of course as important in Japan as it is in the US, China or Sweden. So I think it's important to have like a global perspective of what inclusion is, but then also to break it down on a national level.
That's great. So I guess pivoting back to IKEA, so I think it's fantastic you've set targets and you've been able to get there. What's the secret to your success?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would go back to the IKEA values. Equality is a human right, and that has to be the starting point for everybody. So from the CEO and then, all through the organization. If you have that, if you truly have that authentically as your starting point, that we're all worth the same, and we should all get a fair chance and an equal chance to perform, then your dialogue becomes much easier because the starting point is the right starting point. It's not skewed in any way. So I think for us at IKEA, I really do believe that this is why we can also do it globally. We don't have to kind of get lost in policies in different countries. We can be honest with ourselves and authentic and say this is who we are and this is how we want to be.
And so I'm really curious, so it sounds like you had a journey that started around 2012 and now you're seeing the kind of benefits of diversity. So what specific performance benefits have you seen, or what, are there any specific examples of ways?
Yeah, I can take the Japanese example since I am in Japan today. And in Japan, we decided in 2014 to go for equal wages. So the independent, if you're full-time or part-timer, you have the same pay. This is, in some countries this is an given, in some countries it's not. So in Japan it's not. You can pay differently if you're part-timer or full-timer. We decided to go for equal wage, and of course what immediately happened is that turnover goes down because it makes sense to stay. I'm paid the same, I'm less vulnerable. So we all know the cost of recruitment. So, I mean, it's obvious. The win is so obvious. It's a win-win because it's a win-win-win, actually, because it's a win for the coworker, it's a win for the company, and it's also a win for the consumer. So when you meet the coworker in a store, that coworker will be more knowledgeable because they have worked longer with us. So, of course, they know more about selling you a bed or selling you a kitchen than if you have a turnover of 50 or 60 or 100%, which is common in retail. So I think that is like the really good example of the difference it makes to work with equality.
I love that. Can I ask the question in a different way? But I would love you to keep the language of it's a win-win-win. And then, so what I'll maybe ask you is, why is diversity important? And
Why
then
is
diversity important? And then if you could repeat it's a win-win-win for company, consumer, and
Yeah.
employee. Yeah, okay.
Sure. So diversity for us is a win-win-win, and I mean win for the coworker, a win for the company, and a win for the consumer, because the coworker gets to be who they are and perform and get rewarded the right way. The company gets a coworker who is educated and knowledgeable and motivated and also committed because they feel fairly treated. And the consumer gets a knowledgeable coworker who has passion for the company that they work for.
That was so good. Yeah. Well said. I think last thing is, what is your, at IKEA, what is your aspiration? So what's kind of the next horizon of being best in class for diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think if you think future and you think young generation and young consumers, I think they put completely different expectations and demands on companies about transparency, about authenticity, about questions that we have not really talked about before, like where do you buy your products, how do you buy your products, who are your suppliers, what demands do you put on them. So I think that questions around sustainability and origin of products is a new dimension that all global companies will face, with higher demands from the younger generation consumers.
Great. Anything I'm missing, guys? Or is there anything you'd like to say that, like any talking points that usually go over well?
No, I think we're fine.
We're just gonna get a couple shots of you asking questions.
Oh, okay.
So Shannon is gonna go around this way.
Should I maybe give this a
Tanya, are we
Um,
okay?
Just ask a couple of those questions again.
Can you do without the paper?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to answer. She's just gonna.
Okay.
Oh, shoot. Oh, I'm getting
I'm
phone.
kind of
Okay.
doing both. Yeah.
Did you want your tag on?
That's fine. It's fine.
No, you should take it off. You look
Take it
good.
out. Okay.
Can you actually just scroll the tag?
This?
Yeah, the tag.
Oh,
Just
okay.
off the
Oh, sorry.